happened to the 300?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. We're excited to welcome Lisa Hoffman and our wonderful panel for this program on a day in the life of a major gifts officer. Just before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping. Feel free to eat your lunches as you go, and there are bins along the back where you can drop your trash at the end. And if you need a restroom, they're right behind us out there in the hall. I'll just give you one brief overview of who Foundation Center is for those of you who might be joining us for the first time. Foundation Center is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to strengthen the social sector by advancing knowledge about philanthropy. We have 4 regional offices across the country, and at these regional offices, our strategic priorities really to help connect nonprofits to the resources they need to thrive. We do that in one of 3 ways. One is access to data tools and resources, which you can access upstairs in our library, as well as throughout all of our partners in the Western region, where you can go into, for instance, the San Francisco Public Library and other partners that have licensed our products so that it can be made available to you for free access as well. We also offer training and also convenings like the one we have today. Without any further ado, I'd like to welcome and introduce Lisa Hoffman. I won't read her bio since I know she doesn't like that, and certainly we want to get into the meat of the program, but you can read about her online through the program description. She has been a wonderful source to me as the head of our advisory committee since I started a couple of years ago, and she just has a wealth of knowledge, and I thank her for bringing this program here today. And I'll have her introduce the rest of the panelists.
Thank you, and welcome. It's really great to be here with you. I have worked with nonprofits my entire career, and you are all my heroes, especially now, for obvious reasons. So thank you for all you do. Shout out to the ACLU for defending our civil rights. Woohoo! So I'm going to introduce our panel, and then we want to find out a little bit about you. And just to tell you how I think it's going to go, I have some questions prepared that I'm going to ask our panel. And our third panelist, Katiti Crawford, we're not sure where she is. Hopefully she will join us and she's okay. And I've asked our panelists to ask follow-up questions, so it's a real discussion. We are going to ask that you write down your questions, and we're hoping there'll be at least half an hour for your questions, and that's why you have the paper there. And so that's what I'm thinking it's going to be like, and I guess we'll find out. So to my far left is Shanaz Boga, who is Associate Director of Leadership Gifts at the ACLU of Northern California. You can read her full bio and her amazing experience online, but she's been a major gifts fundraiser for many years in the arts, higher education, healthcare, before turning to social justice, and also has experience in the corporate world, as well as Houston. And Lee Ilian I have known for many years, and she is Director of Leadership Gifts at the San Francisco Marin Food Bank. She also has a lot of experience in fundraising and nonprofits, and she has been on the Glide Church team, San Francisco General Hospital Foundation, and Positive Resource Center in a variety of fundraising-related roles, deep experience in major gifts. And my idea behind this panel is let's have a window for an hour and a half into what is it really like to cultivate major gifts, to ask, to support board members and volunteers, to be part of a large team or a small team. So, and I want to say hi to our live stream audience. We actually have about 170, 200 people live streaming, maybe more. And they'll be posing questions as well. I know they're a little bit like ghosts and apparitions hanging around.
Audience.
And so we would like to know a little bit about you. How many of you are major gifts officers? Raise your hand. Okay, so that's maybe about 15% of our audience for our live stream folks. And how many of you are development directors? Okay, so that's about 25%. Executive directors? Board members? Okay, so we have a few board members, a couple of executive directors, a few people I know are looking for work, and maybe we have some major donors here. Anybody a major donor? Okay, well, they'll probably come late. And then just one other thing. How many of you are with organizations that have budgets of, let's say, less than $1 million? Raise your hand. So that's maybe 10%. How about $1 million to 2.5? Okay, a couple. 2.5 to 7.5? Okay, so that's maybe also about 10%. Over 7.5? Okay, so we have some large organizations represented today. And one other question, how many of you have organizations that focus on social justice? Okay, so that's maybe 5%. How about health? Okay, so a smattering. Animals? Okay, one animal person. How about education? Okay, youth? So we have a real cross-section of art, environment. So we have a real interesting cross-section of causes, of sizes of organizations, and various roles. So I'm going to start our questions in just a moment. Will you join me, unless you're taking notes or live tweeting, in turning off your cell phone? Some of you know that I am an ordained Zen priest, and if your phone is vibrating, you're not completely present. And why not be completely present? And so the first thing I've asked of our panelists is to give us a sense of their organization's mission and vision, the overall size in terms of budget and staff, also development, how much is raised annually, how much of that is from individual gifts, and then digging down a little bit more, how much of that is major gifts, and at what point does a major gift or leadership gift start? So, Shanaz, feel free.
Yeah, so hello everybody. I am so thrilled to be here and so excited to have my personal cheerleading squad right here in front of me, all ACLUers. And I'm really excited to be talking about what I love, because I do truly love being a major gifts officer. So what is the mission of the ACLU? We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit affiliate of the national organization. And in the plainest terms, our mission is to defend and advance civil liberties and civil rights. But of course, it's not a plain and simple mission. It's actually quite a profound mission, I think. And it just thrills me, actually, to think of really historic moments in our history and see the arc, connect the dots. So for things like individual rights and freedom to marry, the ACLU represented the couple in the famous Loving case in the 1950s that struck down the ban on interracial marriages. And then, of course, we had the case in 2015 that legalized same-sex marriage as well. So you kind of see the arc. And on the way, we actually lost a case that when we tried to legalize same-sex marriage. So it kind of gives me a thrill when we talk about the mission to actually sit there and see real-life examples of what we do. So yeah, it's pretty incredible. So in terms of our size, this is the Northern California affiliate, and we have 88 people on our staff, and that includes a smaller office in Fresno and a small office in Sacramento. Our annual operating budget is about $14 million for this fiscal year, and our development budget for this year is about $16 million. And out of that, $6.5 million is leadership gifts. So when we're talking of major gifts, I guess during this conversation, I'll be probably referring to it as leadership gifts, because that's what we would call it at the ACLU. But just to confuse you, we also have a major gifts program. So I might talk about that a little bit as well.
And at what, can you tell us at what point a major gift
Yeah, sure.
And what point of leadership?
Yeah, so a leadership gift, we would consider a leadership gift from about $25,000 upwards with a heavy concentration on $100,000 and up. And that would either be a gift, someone who actually has given us a gift at that level or has the capacity to give us a gift at that level. And then a major gift is really $10,000 and up to about $25,000, or maybe even a little higher, but for donors who are not in the leadership gifts portfolio.
Thank you. Lee.
So I'm very fortunate to work for the San Francisco Marin Food Bank. We have an incredibly simple mission that as a fundraiser is really great. Our mission is to end hunger in San Francisco and Marin. No small feat, but it's something that you can really engage with donors on. Our operating budget is $22 million. Of that, only $4 million is government funding. We also have about $75 million worth of in-kind food, so it really takes our budget way up. And all that food is actually counted. And so of our total fundraised budget, 60% comes from individuals. $1,000 and up is about $5.5 million, and what we consider an actual major gift worthy of portfolio is $10,000 and up, and that accounts for $3 million or more. What am I forgetting here?
How many people in your team?
Oh, yes. We have 24 people in our development office. That includes volunteer services. We have a very robust volunteer department. We have 40,000 people coming in every year. And we also have marketing and communications on the team. On the leadership gifts team, we have 2 gift officers. I carry a portfolio. We have a major gifts coordinator. And we also have foundations on the team. And then, of course, we staff the Chief Development Officer and the Executive Director.
Thank you. So just digging down into the title of this workshop, tell us what a day in your life is like. And I was hoping you'd answer both as being director or associate director of leadership gifts and also with your major gifts officer hat, just to give us a sense of both roles.
Yeah, well, I'm sure as many of you know, it's kind of hard to say a typical day because no day is typical. But I do try, and so I don't know if I'm going to be, if I'm not answering your question directly, please tell me. But I do try and accomplish at the start of each day, I try and set myself some goals and, setting aside the daily minutia of responding to emails and phone calls and meetings and all of this, I do try and pretty consistently accomplish 2 or 3 goals. And the first thing that and I've done this for years, for all the years that I've been a major gifts officer, is that I make sure that I am caught up on anything that impacts the mission of my organization. So whether it's negative or positive or good news or bad news, I spend a chunk of my morning making sure that I'm all caught up on that. And with the ACLU, of course, a large part of that is really reading the news. I mean, we've been in the news a lot lately, which is, I think, a good thing. I mean, well, the news is depressing, but I'm glad that we're there to kind of be at the forefront of the fight. So I make sure that I do that. It just gives me a level of comfort for the rest of the day when I'm talking with people and donors specifically. The second thing I try and do is communicate with donors, at least, even if it's just one donor on a daily basis, obviously not the same donor, but I try and at least either email or call. It might be something as simple as sending a link to a news article that I know they'll be interested in, but I make sure that I reach out to at least one or a few donors and accomplish that. And then the third thing I try and do is I kind of try and look at a portion or a slice of my portfolio, and I might have kind of determined this at the start of the week or a few days before, but I try and look at a few donors and do something that really advances that relationship. So, it might be something a little bit more strategic than what I've done previously with reaching out to that donor. It might be like asking for a meeting, or it might be, working on a proposal. It might be talking to a program officer in the office that that really I can get some information to pass on. So it's something that actually moves that relationship forward. And if I manage to do those three things, then I've had a good day.
So I want to ask Lee to answer, and then I want to ask a follow-up of both of you, which is how would you describe what does moving a relationship forward mean as opposed to, say, a touch?
So I was really thinking about this question because, as you said, no day is really the same. And I tend to work in this very ADD way, depending on what the demands are of me from the various people, from my team, from above, from the board. In an ideal world, I would review, of course, take care of all the emails and the administrative things, but I'd review my portfolio to see who hasn't been touched yet and who hasn't been given a gift. And then that's how I set my goals for the week. And they make it onto my little list of people I need to contact and do some kind of discovery outreach to. And see if I can get a meeting. And part of that is really going into donors' records and familiarizing myself with who they are, because unless I've had really personal interaction with them, I don't remember who they are and what they did and who they've last been in contact with. So assuming that they get back to me and they're willing to engage in some way, either meet or just say, hi, yes, I'm here, thanks for getting in touch, no, I don't want to meet, I can start putting together a plan for them for the rest of the year, of the fiscal year, which is really the kind of meaningful contact that you're talking about. If they do want to meet, I spend a lot of time researching them. Someone on the team may actually do the dossier research, and then I will put together some kind of strategy for the meeting based on what I know about them. And then we have many meetings. I'm sure nobody in this room has a lot of meetings. We actually workshop these strategies, which is really, really helpful. And then on another kind of typical day, if you're actually meeting with the donor, I try and engage our executive director or a board member. Hopefully the donor will agree to come to the warehouse that we have in San Francisco or even in Marin. And we tour them, and that really is a very ripe place for questions and to engage on their particular interests. Following that, I would need to do a contact report so that we have all of that logged in our database. And I don't want to get too boring, so I'll wait. Do you have share?
Okay, Titi's in the emergency room, possible broken ankle from falling down Muni stairs. So we will
no.
wish her well.
Oh, dear.
Oh,
Thanks,
no.
Michelle.
Oh, wow.
Sorry.
Ooh, that's unfortunate.
I know.
You know, I could go on ad nauseum about what a day looks like. There are many meetings, both with staff and one-on-ones, because I do manage the team. We're also in the early stages of a capital campaign, and so I've been serving on the campaign core, working with volunteers and our executive team to develop strategy, the case statement, all manner of things related to the capital campaign. And we've actually started briefing donors now and making asks. So I've been involved in briefings, have not actually solicited gifts myself. That's when we punt it to our volunteers and executive team.
So I have a couple of follow-up questions. I wonder if you have any follow-ups for each other first.
It sounds like a typical day.
Yeah.
I mean, really, doesn't it?
So, okay, as I said, I think probably everybody would be interested in knowing how you would describe the difference between, say, a touch. You send a link about a case the ACLU's won, or maybe the hunger statistic has improved, and actually moving a relationship forward. So what do you do specifically to move a relationship forward, and how do you know that that's worked?
So I'm very big on moves management. I don't know if many of you use it, but I've used it for a while now, and it really helps me to develop strategies for my donors. And so, yeah, so a touch is literally, it's stewardship. But I personally think that stewardship is kind of like the stepchild in development. I really feel like stewardship is cultivation in and of itself. It's really, they're two sides of the same coin. And numerous times, I have made a move that I thought was just a touch. I've sent an email with a link to an article to a donor, and that has ignited the donor's interest. And I might have tried several times to reach out to them, to schedule something. I've had no response. But just being able to pique their interest and to do something that they feel. And then the other good thing, I'm a little ADD myself, but the other good thing about it is that you're doing something without asking for anything in return. So, you're not asking them for a gift. Of course, you're not asking them for a meeting. You're not even asking them to respond. But when they respond, it's just fabulous. So that, I guess, would be, I don't know if I'm even answering your question, but it's kind of a touch that can lead to a strategic move. Mm-hmm. But truly, I guess, in moves management terms, a strategic move is a move that takes your donor to the next level. So, we've all seen the gift cycle, and we've all seen identification, cultivation, solicitation, close. But, and in a perfect world, that would be perfectly linear. But it's often not. And anything that moves your donor closer to, first of all, building a strong relationship with you or your organization really is what the relationship, where the relationship is. So to build that relationship, to move them closer to an ask if you haven't made the ask yet, a close, and then once they've actually become a donor, just to keep them engaged. So many of our donors have the capacity to give more than what they are giving us, and I really feel like good stewardship is great cultivation.
Let's take just a moment and define some terms here. Stewardship, cultivation, portfolio. I don't want to make any assumptions that everybody knows what those are or is on the same page. So maybe, how do you define stewardship, cultivation, and portfolio?
So we have a very formal moves management system. Stewardship is once the gifts come in, it's the reaching out, it's telling people, saying thank you. And then I agree with you. Stewardship and cultivation are sometimes very blurred. Cultivation is furthering the relationship, not just a thank you. And so that can be sending articles, just touching base for us, inviting them to special family volunteer shift, those kinds of things that are not necessarily a formal meeting. Stewardship, cultivation,
portfolio.
Thank you. You see the ADD. Yeah. Maybe it's common to gift officers.
It's contagious.
Yeah. Well, I caught it from you.
Oh, thanks.
So portfolios are a way of placing donors into a management system so that they can be watched closely by a relationship manager, a gift officer. And this is in another section of this conversation, I'm imagining.
True. We'll get more specific, yes.
But that's basically it. It's really how you watch these moves and these touches and grow your relationships with donors to the next level.
So how do you know that you have moved a relationship forward in a meaningful, strategic way as opposed to a touch?
We have activity reports, and so you can see the number of actions or touches and the gifts that come in. We also always are trying to get meetings, but as Shanaz said, these cultivation and stewardship touches really do advance that. And then we look at the dollars brought in. Are they upgrading their gifts? Are they renewing each year? And are they willing to meet with us? Because we've actually reached out to them on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just add to that for a second? So yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think if we are all as perfectly organized as to have a strategy for each donor, and we've actually planned our moves, and we can see that we've achieved, you have a little checkbox and you check it all the moves off. We're obviously moving the relationship strategically, and that would be a wonderful thing. But I think in reality, it would be anything that strengthens that relationship. So anything that draws the donor closer to you, your organization, and closer to the mission, and gets them more engaged and gets them passionate. I mean, in my book, that's a strategic move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to skip ahead and let's continue discussing major donor portfolios. So my question for both of you is, if you think about, and I know it's a little bit of a what's a typical portfolio, but what's your ideal portfolio in relationship to its composition? So how many ongoing donors, how many prospects, people who either haven't given or maybe they've given on a lower level and you've determined they can give on a higher level, donors who are already major donors or leadership level donors, and you're cultivating towards a much larger ask. And one of the things I'm curious about is, I've worked with people where they have a portfolio composition that maximizes frustration. And what I mean is there's too many prospects that don't necessarily respond, and it depletes either a volunteer solicitor or a major gifts officer's energy. So I just kind of wonder if you think about that when you manage your portfolios and populate them.
So I've got a member of our wonderful research team right here. So we are very fortunate. We have two people dedicated to researching and identifying prospects for us. And no big surprise, all of you have heard that the ACLU has been supported very strongly, and we've just received this outpouring of generosity since the election. So we really have had prospects in the last 12 to 18 months that have self-identified in many ways. They've given us first-time gifts that have been significant, or certainly through our capacity screening, of which my wonderful team member is a great exponent. We've identified them as prospects that we could put in a leadership gifts or a major gifts portfolio. But then the next step is to qualify them even further. So they have self-identified in a way, but we really do need to qualify them even further to make them closer to the organization, to build that relationship. And my portfolio personally, to get to your specific question, because of the slightly atypical year we've had, is heavier on prospects than I think most typical major gifts portfolios would be. At the moment, it's about 60-40, I would say. So I've got about 60 pre-qualification prospects that I'm in the process of qualifying, and about 40 core donors. And that's going to be, I think that's going to change. I mean, that's going to, we're constantly evaluating it, and we're constantly trying to find the right number. But the reality is that as long as we have a pipeline of prospects that need to be qualified, we will probably be heavy on the qualification side.
So we do wealth screenings every year. So we've got our our stable of regular donors who do need attention from a relationship manager. And then with these wealth screenings, with Wealth Engine, and we do RFM analysis, we identify new prospects and also donors who are giving through our mid-level program at the $5,000 and up level. Once we've identified these people who have capacity, we do a lot of research on these donors to see if they're actually good for portfolios. And then we actually cycle people through. If people aren't responsive after 6 touches, discovery touches.
6 touches, yay, it's the magic number.
Yeah. Then we'll take them out of portfolio, and we have this kind of holding, it's a parking lot of donors who aren't quite ready to go into direct response, but they're not really worthy of gift officer time. It's not a good use of their time.
So I want to dig down a little bit, this is a follow-up, on moves management, which I think is mythical for some people. So maybe we can start with you, Lee, and each of you can tell us more specifically, what are the overall moves? And then, Shanaz, you had talked about making a plan for the year. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit more specifically about how you might do that. I mean, feel free to use an actual donor, and how the two relate, the moves management and making a plan for the year.
Sure. So I learned about moves management before it was sexy. I like saying that. I mean, truly, I learned moves management many, many years ago when I worked at the University of Texas. And I remember when we were taught it, or we were told about it, we had this kind of a graph, and you had quadrants, and you kind of plotted your prospects and your donors in each quadrant, and based on the quadrant they were in, you moved them. I mean, the whole idea was to move them around that quadrant, but it helped you focus on specific slices of your portfolio that fell within a certain quadrant. So, the ones who were high capacity, high interest are the ones that you obviously have at the front burner, and you're going to be spending a lot of your time strategizing and working with them. The ones who are high capacity, lower interest, I mean, you really, really want to get to them because they have high capacity, but you might do the 6 touches and discover that there's just no interest. So I kind of like that grid. I haven't actually employed it here at the ACLU because my portfolio is churning and turning, and if I'm managing to qualify people and move them to my core donor cohort, then I'm doing a good job. And if I'm not, then I'm disqualifying them and getting new donors in my portfolio. But in terms of developing a strategy for those core donors, it really is, it's so dependent on the relationship that they have with the organization, who they have that relationship with, and their interest. So if we have a donor that has a relationship with our executive director, I will plan my moves really centered around him and make sure that we make obviously good use of his time, but we actually leverage that relationship and make, I mean, it's the old rule of get the person to ask who the donor is not going to be able to say no to. And so I kind of work backwards. I mean, I personally kind of work backwards from that, and I mean, it kind of works for me.
I'd like to ask you a question. What are the moves that you would plan around the ED?
So meetings, of course, but we also I have a particular donor that does not live in San Francisco that I have established somewhat of a relationship with, but I really feel like my executive director needs to get involved in the relationship. But because he does not live in San Francisco, it's really mostly through phone calls and email communication. And so far that's worked. I mean, so far they've called each other a few times, they've emailed each other a few times. I'm hopeful that this donor might come to San Francisco at some point and we can plan a meeting. But those are the kinds of moves that I guess I would plan around the executive director.
Thanks. So you talked about having a grid, and that was back in Houston.
Oh my gosh, in the dark ages.
We have something similar. In addition to logging moves, the stewardship, cultivation, solicitation, etc., we actually have tiered our portfolios. So we have 1 through 4, and I talked about the parking lot, which is people moving in and out of portfolio. But we decided to do a tier 1, which is anyone that we actually currently have a personal relationship with. Have we met with them? Have we had scheduled phone meetings? So it really has to, the quality of the relationship is very high. Tier 2 are people who are willing to engage with us, but at a lower level. So really it's desk-based work. They may come to an event, but it generally is not going to go beyond that, but they may be very high dollar value donors, and we need to continue to reach out to them in a meaningful way. And then tier 3 are the people who we've researched, we don't know anything about them. They may have been giving to the organization for many, many years, but they've never met with anybody or haven't met with anybody in recent memory. So that's how we do it.
So I'm going to put the two of you on the spot, and I bet our audience and participants would love a little overview document of your moves management. So I'm going to follow up with you, and me and the Foundation Center will make sure you all get emailed the overview documents. I have it on my to-do list. So I want to skip down to, since you mentioned supporting your ED, in who else in your organization cultivates and solicits major gifts? Board members, volunteers, CEO, how are they managed, how are they supported? And I'm big in my work with groups on frustration management. And what I've learned over the years is for those of us who support other people, there needs to be a proportion of folks who follow through with a minimum of agony. And so I just wonder if that's something you think about when you assign your major gifts officers to support others.
So we have our board is, we have a core group of our board which really forms our development committee, and they have in many cases established long-term relationships with donors in their communities and are fantastic at soliciting and closing those gifts. I personally don't staff that, so I can't speak very fully about the process that we engage in with them, but they are wonderful ambassadors, they're very involved, and they're very committed. And so we're very grateful for that, and they are staffed, and they are briefed, and they do a fantastic job. As far as our executive director is concerned, he has a very healthy portfolio, and he is staffed by our director of development or our director of leadership gifts. And on a weekly basis, they'll spend 2 hours, maybe more than 2 hours with him, reviewing his portfolio and actually sometimes physically sitting there and making sure that he will send the email that he's supposed to send or make the phone call that he's supposed to make, so that we are sure that the strategies that we have in place and the strategic moves that we want to happen actually do happen. And then, of course, when there is a meeting that our executive director will go to, he will often go with a member of the staff. So if I need to go with him, for example, I will prepare briefings. I will spend time with him before the meeting, and I will fully brief him, and we'll discuss strategy, and then we'll go to the meeting, and something will happen that will just take us away, of course. But I mean, that's just the world we live in, and so you try as much as possible to prepare. I mean, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Oh, you're doing great. Yeah.
We also have our program officers that are fabulous resources, by the way. I should mention that. Our policy experts who are wonderful partners when it comes to talking to our donors about specific interests and specific issues, because we certainly aren't the experts on that. And so, again, we would do a full briefing, we would talk with them, prep them before the meeting, and they do a great job.
Similarly, we work with our executive director in the same way. What has been really interesting for us is with the capital campaign, we have a campaign cabinet made up of volunteers, some board members, some ex-board members, and then other interested parties who have incredible connections. And what we did when we brought this group together was first we did some fundraising. Well, first we presented the case and helped them understand what it was that we were going to be selling. And then we did fundraising training. Once they had the basics, we asked them to provide their contacts who they thought would contribute to the campaign. So we're really working with them and major gift staff, asking them why they think these are good prospects. And so it's a very intimate relationship. Then there's a group called the Campaign Core that determines the strategy for the meetings, will actually prep the board members, the cabinet members for their asks and their briefings. So we spend a lot of time engaging and preparing these volunteers to go out and meet with our donors.
Let me ask you a follow-up, and I know the ACLU has had a number of capital and special campaigns over the last however many years. How do you coordinate and relate your annual major and leadership gifts with your capital campaign and make sure both are robust and appropriate? Maybe we'll start with Lee.
Go ahead.
When we're asking, and please keep in mind that we're really at the beginning of our capital campaign, we're asking for gifts above and beyond annual commitments. We're working with a consulting firm, CCS, who has really guided us in our strategy for this and made sure that we're on track, and have also told us that apparently annual giving picks up. During and after. You're nodding. It's true. Not just political events. Good.
She knows.
I agree also.
Yeah. And just as an aside, the other wonderful thing about doing a capital campaign, even though it's a little crazy, is that it really brings major gifts into alignment with the strategies for a campaign. And so all these moves and these tiers and how you measure activity is really very much aligned with how we view these capital campaigns.
Yeah, similar at the ACLU. So we have our annual donors that we love to renew every year, and obviously hope that they'll give us an increased gift in as they renew. But we would love to be also talking with them about a campaign gift. And clearly many of them don't have the capacity to make a really large campaign gift, but we do target the ones that we think have that capacity, and we develop that strategy and we start conversations with them. And it's really helpful, I think, when you have a donor that has been a long-term donor of the ACLU, and then you start talking to them about investing in the campaign. I mean, I met with a donor recently who I started telling him a little bit about our campaign, which will celebrate the 100th year in 2020 of the ACLU's founding. And he got all emotional because he's been a member and he supported the ACLU for 50 years. And so he got really emotional, and I could, you can just tell that it was something that he felt so invested in and so proud of. And so I kind of brought up the subject of the campaign. He's been an annual donor so far, and left it at that. We didn't discuss the campaign specifically, but I certainly put the topic out there, and I am going to circle back to him and start talking to him about a campaign gift.
Is this a campaign gift that's for a building or some other
It's a comprehensive campaign. So, building campaigns are. Is yours a building campaign? Yeah.
Can you explain what that means, a comprehensive
campaign?
campaign?
A comprehensive campaign is when every single gift that's made really is counted towards the campaign, as opposed to a discrete campaign for a building or for a program. It's literally comprehensive.
Thank you. Surprise question. What do you love about what you do?
Oh, you go first.
There are many donors who I've engaged with who I have been fascinated by and inspired by. Just not every single person, but there are really interesting people who are deeply committed to a cause that they will never benefit from, other than feeling good about what they've done. And that's deeply meaningful to me.
Thank you.
So for me, it's really similar. The people I meet are just honestly wonderful, exceptional. They really, many of them have left a lasting impression on me personally. For me, this job is very special because I have up till now been major gifts officer I've worked in arts organizations, I've worked in higher education, academic medicine, and then I took some time off to be a full-time mom, and then the election happened, and I was so determined to do something and do my part. And so for me, what I love about this specific job is that I really truly feel like in my own teeny tiny little way, I'm having some kind of impact. And social justice is, if I can make a difference in any way at all, that's what I want to do.
Thank you. So I have one other question that I want to ask, and I'd like to request all of you to pass your questions to Michelle over there, and if we could have our live stream questions. And if you have any program ideas, write those down and send them up as well. But my last question is if you would tell us 2 stories And the first one is, what's the most surprising ask that you've done or that you've heard about? And what's the most challenging that you've done or heard about?
So I'm going to do the second one first because I think after you hear that, you're not going to want to hear any more stories. So this was when I was oh my God, this is a horror story. I bring it out every Halloween to just scare myself. And then I put it back in the dark recesses of my brain. So this is early in the year. So this was when I was working at the University of Texas, and we had a longtime supporter who, in healthcare, academic healthcare, there's a term, grateful patient fundraising. I don't know if many of you are familiar with it. I don't like it very much, but it's what it's called. And she had been a long-term supporter of one of our research programs. She was the patient of a physician that was doing all this research that she supported because it was impacting her personally. And so she had left us at this point, when the story happens, I believe she'd left us like $10 million in her will. We'd named a clinic in her honor in recognition of that gift. I had asked her for $2 million as an outright gift, which she was thinking about at this time. And I was sitting in my office one day, and this physician whose work she supports and who she's a patient of, he just kind of came bounding into my office, and he said, Shanaz, I just have to talk to you about something. And I said, yeah, sure. And he had just met with her daughter, and her daughter was a little difficult. And so he was like, well, I just met with, I'm going to call her Samantha. I just met with Samantha, and she's just, she's so difficult, and she's got this edge about her. And he was essentially not saying very complimentary things about her. And then his phone rings, and he pulls it out of his shirt pocket, and he says, oh, guess what? That's her. Boom, and he puts it back. Well, yeah. Turns out that he'd accidentally put the phone on. Yeah. Thank you. Feel bad for me. Yeah. So you can imagine the cleanup after that. And I was personally very resentful because I had never met her. And he kept saying my name in the course of the conversation, and Shanaz this and Shanaz this. And apparently when she called him back to say the phone was on and I heard everything, by the way, who is this Shanaz person? Like, who is she? And I'm like, really? So anyway, the cleanup was very complicated. We had to get the Vice Chancellor of University Relations involved because we'd already named this clinic in her honor, and the Board of Regents had to approve that naming. And it was very likely that the mom might hear about this and want to take back her gift, revoke her planned gift. We had to get the dean of the medical school obviously involved. We got the president of the university involved. We did not get the physician involved. We made sure he stayed in his lab and his clinic. But, I think we were incredibly lucky because either the conversation hadn't taken place between the mom, who was the donor, and the daughter, or else the mom just decided to ignore it. But, we ended up getting $1 million from the $2 million ask. I really don't think what happened impacted it. She never referenced it to us. We never referenced it to her, although we would have fallen on the sword and just, apologize profusely. But I think in this case, it was one of those situations where the relationship with the physician kind of was what started the disaster, but it was also what saved it. She was his patient, and he was saving her life. So I think it just put her in, whether her Samantha told her about it or not, I don't know. But I think she was in a position where she just felt just very compelled to support his research. So that was my horror story.
I used to do the programming for the Development Executives Roundtable, and whenever Friday the 13th fell in October, we would have a program called Fundraising Disasters.
Oh, my God.
And it was very reassuring for everybody.
Yes.
But all the fundraising disasters were like 20 years ago.
Oh, my God. And it's always been my dream, by the way, to tell the story to a group of fundraisers because y'all will feel my pain. So thank you.
So you want to tell us about the most surprising?
Yeah, well, I don't know if the ask itself was surprising. I was thinking about that question. But certainly the follow-through was surprising. So this was a gift that we got again, this was when I was at the University of Texas, and it was the $3 million ask that we had made in support of rehabilitative medicine after strokes. Our donor was very reclusive. It was his mother who had been the patient. He was very reclusive. He wanted to stay anonymous through the whole course of the negotiation, which was completely fine. I had to talk with him on the phone, and then there was this weird triangulation where somebody else would get in on the phone, and I would be talking and negotiating the gift with him. So that was kind of unusual. I don't know if it was surprising or unusual. But then, I mean, there was just all these things that happened that just made it so complicated. So he was a Canadian citizen that lived in Houston. He wanted to make the gift from stock that he had in the UK, but he wanted to get the tax deduction in Canada. And so the University of Texas had to really apply to the Canadian IRS, equivalent of the IRS, to become an approved institution, which was a very lengthy process. And I mean, we managed to achieve it. I mean, you know, end result is that the gift happened. It came through. I have never met this donor. It was the first and only time I think I've actually negotiated a gift on the phone the entire time, not even email. We sent him a fruit basket to say thank you. You know, I mean, it was just a really unusual gift.
Mine are mainly just strange. One actually happened yesterday, and
Oh my gosh! So you're still recovering?
yeah, I'm not sure if it was really bad or not so bad, with a happy ending, and it's probably with someone who supports you guys. So this is a donor who has been interested for a few years. He started off with $10,000 and then got his organization to give, and they kept increasing. And then last year he gave us $100,000, and we're all over his social media when something strikes him. And he doesn't like too much information, and he refuses to meet. He's quite Asperger-y. So, you know, everything's on email. And so I sent him an email about our advocacy and policy work, knowing that he's very devastated by things that are happening in the world and is into fair journalism and blah, 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 and civil rights. And I told him the work that we're doing around SNAP, which is what used to be called food stamps, and the Farm Bill that's coming up. And I asked him to double his gift. And he wrote back probably within 10 minutes and said, "Thank you, Lee. These other issues are mission critical right now, maybe later." And I've been trying to figure out really the strategy for later. You know, what does later mean? When is later? Is it spring because our fiscal year ends?
Yeah, right, exactly.
and we budgeted
Can it be
a
next
big
week?
gift. Yeah. So that was a challenging ask, and it really did take some thought to try and figure out what this email could be. I mean, it's pretty strange to write an email for that kind of ask. Yeah. So that was that. And the other's just a bizarre encounter with this man who used to be on our board about 27 years ago. And there may even have been some bad blood. He continued to give a very, very modest amount. So he agreed to meet, and we had coffee, and I learned all about the organic processed meats industry, and it went on and on and on. And at that point, I realized that he was not ever going to make a major gift. This was where he was going to stay. And so I needed to pivot, and I said, "You've been such a committed supporter. Have you and your wife remembered us in your estate plans?" And he said, "No." And so it was it's very strange. It was a very, very strange meeting because he clearly didn't really feel very engaged with us, but had taken the meeting, and I'm unclear about why. But he won't be in portfolio anymore. So those are it, yeah.
Give him to Shanaz.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'll take him.
So I have a question for Shanaz from the audience, and two of the same questions for you. So let's start with the one for Shanaz, and that is how you strategically address emergency funding needs without robbing from annual major donors.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And I mean, and I've had some experience with it because it's not just emergency funding that we've had to deal with, but I've worked in institutions where you have the center for this and a center for that and a research program for this, and you're asking the same donors for all these different things, and it just becomes a challenge. Honestly, when it comes to emergency funding, I don't think I've ever been in that position that I would have to, I've had to do that. But I think it would be a question of making your case. It would also clearly depend on the capacity of the annual fund donor that we're talking about and what they're capable of doing, I would imagine. But I think it would be a question of making your case, because you're essentially asking them to give above and beyond what they've been doing. And if it was me, frankly, I'm kind of strategizing as I'm talking with you. I guess I would go to my longest term donors, my core donors, really analyze my portfolio, see who the ones are that have the highest capacity, who aren't giving at capacity, see where the strongest relationships are. People can go out and talk to them and ask them. I mean, those are the kinds of things I would look at.
Anything you would add?
Yeah, we've actually been talking about that a lot as creating some kind of impact fund where people can contribute to it year-round, or for disasters like the North Bay fires where we helped out. But it would be very flexible so that we could use it for general operating funds or however we need it to make maximum impact. So that's just an idea.
Yeah.
Thank you. So a hot topic is, what does it look like when you and your team workshop meeting and other major donor strategies for move management?
Do you want to answer that, David?
If you do, you have to come up and talk in the microphone for our live stream audience.
So every week we have a major gifts team meeting where we review all the activity and any upcoming meetings. At that meeting we present the dossier where we've researched extensively. The donor and the major gift officer will have prepared the strategy and talking points. And then it's just an opportunity for the whole team to give feedback. Have you thought about doing this? We know that this donor's interested in children. Why aren't you taking them to a healthy children pantry? There are just so many things that was a very obvious one. But things that the gift officer may not have thought of, that other people on the team may have thought of. Does that answer your question?
We do something similar, brainstorm essentially over before our meetings, we send around a question to all the frontline fundraisers and ask if there's a specific donor or specific case that they would like to talk about at the meeting. And if we do, we present it, and then the rest of the team essentially brainstorms and helps us come up with a strategy to move that donor forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I wanted to request, if anyone is writing a follow-up to a follow-up, please write legibly. I have 2 or 3 questions. I have no idea what the questions are. So we have a few day-in-the-life questions. What percentage of your day is spent behind your desk doing administrative stuff as opposed to getting out the door and actually meeting with people? And what would administrative stuff be?
Okay, so for me, I'm very fortunate in this job. I'm actually a frontline fundraiser. I'm not a manager. I've been a manager in my previous positions, and I've had to manage teams of fundraisers, and I have been very badly stuck behind my desk doing administrative things when I've had to do that. And it really does rob not just your time, but it kind of robs your passion for what you're doing, because you don't get the chance to step out in front of people and talk about it. So this position actually is wonderful. I love it. It's structured so well. I really have very little to do administratively. I prepare for internal meetings. That takes a little while. We have a national office in New York that requires us to look at certain reports. I mean, we collaborate with them great, but we do have to go through certain processes. That takes some time. But for the most part, I'm very fortunate. I do not have that much to do administratively. Right, Corey? That's what we aim for, right?
Corey is the Director of Development at the ACLU. Wave your hand.
I actually have a lot of administrative work. I oversee a team of 5, and we're currently without a grant writer, so some of my time's focused on that, and then all the internal meetings and staff supervision. And so it does take away from frontline fundraising. Optimally, it would be about 50% of my time if I could get there and there was no staff attrition.
Yeah.
So here's a question I think a lot of people will have who are in smaller shops or shops that don't have a lot of staff, and that is for those of us who wear multiple development hats, what do you recommend they do to start taking steps towards major gifts when time is limited and, ROI is imperative?
Yeah, it's really it's so easy to say, right? It's a question of discipline, and that is so easy to say. And I started my career in a tiny shop that was just 4 of us, and I really still maintain it's one of the best ways to learn about major gifts fundraising, because all of us had to do a little bit of everything. So don't knock that part of being in a small shop. I think it gives you just incredible experience from all different kinds of angles that you wouldn't have if you were just doing fundraising. I think you just have to be disciplined. I think you just have to set yourself a goal, at the start of the day, and say you're going to reach out to even one person. And sometimes it really is only one person. But if you can even accomplish that during the day, that's fantastic. For some people, it works to have work blocks. I've worked with people who say, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are my meeting with people days, like meeting with donors day, and Thursday and Friday are my admin days. And that might work. It never worked for me. So I think you can kind of, through trial and error, but I would just say it's a question of just forcing yourself to make that call, to send that email, to go on that visit, and start with what's easy, I mean, pick the low-hanging fruit.
80-20 rule?
Excuse me?
80-20 rule, low-hanging fruit?
Right.
I would say I've been in a very small shop where I've had to do absolutely everything. And if you're doing any kind of mailing, even if it's only to 1,000 people, and gifts come in and you suspect, I don't know, maybe it's $250 or $500, whatever your threshold might be, you don't need the expensive tools like Wealth Engine and these other screening tools. Just do a quick Google search and see. But also, it's super, super important to just call and thank people. They really appreciate it. And your next gift is probably going to be a little higher, or at least you'll be able to retain them. And if you do find out good things about them, call, thank them, and invite them to meet. So that's what I would say.
Oh, that's a perfect segue into our next audience question. What assumptions can you make if a potential donor agrees to meet? There's a nice broad question, huh?
Ooh, yeah, wow. You want to go first?
Sure. I mean, other than meat man. I think that people who agree to meet are usually very interested in hearing more and interested in supporting the organization at a much deeper level. They really want to understand how their money is being used and why they should invest.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think that if they're meeting with you, that's a really good sign. That's a step forward. I would suggest please do not ambush them. Do not ask them for a gift if that is not the reason why you called and asked for a meeting. Make it very clear what you're going to be meeting with them about. And I think it's one of the steps in your strategy in soliciting them and building that relationship. It really is. If you get a face-to-face meeting, I mean, that's awesome. That's relationship building 101 right there.
So a follow-up on a meeting day in the life question. I've been told that I should try to have 15 meetings per week. While these meetings are fun, inspiring, and each one is different, I am worried that I won't have the energy to keep up the pace. How do you stay energized, upbeat, and not gain a ton of weight from all the food and drinks?
Who has 15 meetings?
No, I mean, Goalie.
Come on, fess up. Maybe that was live stream.
Oh, maybe.
That was me.
It was?
Oh.
You have 15 meetings a week?
No, but that's the goal.
Really?
Um,
Wow,
I
that's.
Maybe
think
15 over 2 weeks, but I just got an email from a development consultant, and it was very high.
It is high.
Maybe don't hire that development consultant.
Well, it wasn't me because I'm up here. I'm just saying.
yeah, I don't know what to say. I think that is actually not
The
reasonable.
whole ACLU team is saying no.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. 15 meetings is pretty unusual. I mean, it's really unusual. I've never heard that.
Me neither.
In a week?
Well, I just got this. I know my phone is off, but I'll try to.
Maybe they.
Anyway, the point is, if you're doing a lot of meetings, how do you stay energized? And, you know, a lot of times they seem repetitive. You're telling the same stories. And anyway,
Although,
you're just doing major gifts. Like, I'm very out front
Mhm.
on the desk. So trying to figure out how to make it sustainable.
I think if you're listening for what the donor is interested in, it can turn the conversation into something different, so you're not just working from a script. And getting to know the donor and just hearing about what their passion is. Does that excite you?
Yeah.
And also
They're all
knowing,
different, though.
yeah, exactly. And also knowing that 15 visits is, in my opinion, ridiculous.
You're a road warrior. I mean, really, we would call you a road warrior. I mean, if it's really high. I've never heard that.
Do you mind saying what your organization is?
Probably not.
Yeah, I will offline, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, also engaging other people who work for your organization, so you're not the one who's always telling the story.
So just a little change of pace, a technical question or two. Is there a specific moves management program or database that you use? And if yes, which one?
And there is a very famous book written by the person, I can't remember his name. No, we don't actually, at the ACLU, we don't technically follow like the program, right? I mean, like we do moves management more informally. We don't kind of really do the textbook program, I don't think. But there is that book. I can see it in my head. Do you remember who's written it?
I don't remember either. Can someone Google that who has their phone on specifically for this session's purposes?
Yeah, I can't, I mean, I know there's.
But I have the image of the
Yes,
name
me
in my
too.
head, yeah.
Me too.
We have a more formal moves management practice, and we actually follow through in Razor's Edge. So we can actually track every single move. And then as a corollary, we have something that we developed called a portfolio action influence report that will show us every single activity that we've done by quarter that leads to a gift, and every gift officer's activity, because we're starting to measure performance by activity rather than by dollar amount, because we believe that the dollars are going to come in if you're doing what you should be doing, but not 15 meetings.
It was 15 a month. Not a
15 a month. Oh, okay. See, I felt bad for you for no reason.
And I think depending on the kind of industry you're in, that could be high, maybe. Yeah.
So this is kind of a follow-up question in terms of who manages quality control of your donor database. And I'm assuming that means tracking that they're fresh, that if they haven't responded, you're moving them into the parking lot, et cetera.
She does. Yeah, we have this great research team that I was telling you about, and there's two of them. And Claire is really, she and Laura work together to make sure that our pipeline is full, our portfolios are fresh. Oh my God, that sounds so amazing. I mean, really, and they are. And that the turnover, there we go. Smart moves, cultivating world-class people and profits. John Tedford, there you go. Thank you.
So I would like to invite the two of you to come up here and tell us how you quality control the database. Wow, they look like deer in headlights.
Sorry, Claire.
Proving once more that no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah, really.
So please introduce yourself and tell us what your title and role is.
Mm-hmm. So my name is Claire. I'm the Prospect Development Manager. Oh, God, I'm having pictures taken of me.
She's famous before her own time.
I think they did already. They snuck them earlier. Yeah. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
We just want to know how you approach quality control in your database. So making sure that you don't kick out a report and everyone rolls their eyes and says, well, a third of these have already said they don't want to give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so so there are actually multiple people doing that. So we have a database manager who's a whole different position, and so she's really making sure that our data in our database is entered correctly, like we're putting the right codes on all of our constituents in our database, and then she's actually spitting out the reports and making sure that and she gets feedback and makes sure that those reports are spitting out the correct people. My role is really looking at the portfolios and making sure that those people that are in portfolios should be in portfolios. So making sure that if somebody has had 6 contacts and they haven't responded, they need to go. They don't need to be in a portfolio. They've clearly indicated by non-response that they don't need to be in that portfolio, and that's really my role. So yeah.
So here's a follow-up question. Don't go anywhere.
No. This is so much pressure.
You're doing great. When do you put a prospective donor back in the portfolio after they have declined cultivation? Quote unquote.
That's interesting. I wouldn't. I can't think of a reason to do that. If somebody has clearly said to you, we don't want to have personalized communication, I can't think of a reason to put them into a portfolio, because what would that portfolio manager do with that donor? Right, exactly. I will say that we do have other ways to steward, cultivate, and solicit renewal gifts. So that person is not going to never ever receive solicitation ever again. They will get proposals from our national office. They will get cultivation mailings and stewardship mailings from our office, from the national office. So they will hear from us. But if they've clearly said to us, please don't talk to me, then we're not going to do that, because that would be mean.
Thank you. Anything you two want to add?
No, I completely agree with Claire. In fact, some of my prospects that are in the qualification stage, I'll contact them a few times, and then I'll go back and look at the contact reports from previous meetings and things, and I will notice that they might have mentioned, several years ago that they really didn't want to be contacted again or whatever. So it's been several years since anyone has contacted them. But those are the kinds of people that I'm not going to really push. I'll try a couple of times, maybe 3 times, and then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Anything you want to add?
Ours is quite similar.
Yeah.
But, if it's been 7 years,
Right.
then we'll reach out again and consider it discovery.
It's like a 7-year itch, huh?
Wait, can I actually
Oh,
jump on that?
look at
Sorry,
you.
I know.
You go, girl.
I'm here, guys. Okay, so actually, in our instance, we did have people in our database who, before the election, had said something to us like, "Please don't reach out to me. I'm going to keep giving you my $500 a year gift or whatever it is." And then after the election, they made a $5,000 gift. In which case, we said, "Okay, landscape has changed. Right. Something has happened. People are more, they're more engaged, and they actually may, even though they said to us 7 years ago or however many years ago that they didn't want to talk to us, I think they might do now. Let's try." So, yeah, there might be a situation like that where you might, right, exactly.
Thank you. Okay, well, you can stay with us or go. It's your choice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay!
So, what is the process for identifying suspects to evaluate for being placed into an officer's portfolio. And a suspect would be someone who has 2 out of 3 indicators as a prospect. There's linkage, there's ability, there's interest, and one of them we're not sure of.
So Claire should answer that question too. Claire, you want to come back
That's
here?
why I said you can come or go.
No, go ahead. No, you. Yeah, because I only have your notes. You have you.
Could you repeat the beginning of the question?
Yes.
Because I was
What is the process for identifying suspects to evaluate for being placed into an officer's portfolio? And actually, there's a related, interesting, important question. How many are in a typical portfolio? How's it balanced?
Okay, so a typical portfolio, thank you. So a typical portfolio, I think in our organization at the moment is about 90-ish. And as Shanaz says, at the moment we are very heavily weighted towards the sort of suspect or unqualified prospect end. So it's about 60% suspect or unqualified prospects and 40% core donors. And how we identify those suspects we actually have, so Laura and I, so it's our 2-person team, we have a really fantastic process of we look at all the gifts that have come in the previous week. And we are looking for gifts that indicate some kind of hand-raising activity, right? So we're looking at people who've increased their gift by a certain percentage over their previous giving. We're looking at people whose cumulative giving has reached, for us, 5 figures, but that might be you might want to use a different marker at a different program. Or just if they've made a gift of $1,000 or more, because that's an interesting sort of level of giving. And there will be crossover, right? There will be people whose cumulative giving has reached $10,000 and they've just made a gift of $1,000. So there will be people who are in all 3 buckets. And we just do a really quick capacity screen for those people. So when we're doing that, when we're looking for a capacity screening, what we're doing is we're looking at, and actually I should give a shout out because it's mostly Laura that's doing this work now, not really me. So, and I think she's watching on the live screen. So hi, Laura. So what we're looking at is we're looking for somebody's real estate assets. We're looking for whether they have a family foundation or some kind of giving vehicle, and we can figure out what the assets are in that giving vehicle. We're looking at their largest philanthropic gift, and that might be to us, but it might also be to another organization. And we're looking for their political giving, so we're looking at what their cumulative political giving has been over the last 5 cycles. And once we do that, we have a nifty calculator that comes up with what we think their capacity rating is. And then once we have a capacity rating for the people who have a sort of certain level of capacity, then we're reviewing those one by one and just saying, okay, should this person go in a portfolio? And we're making the decision, do they have to go in a portfolio right now or can they wait? And that's that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you want to add?
Yeah, we do. In addition to something very similar where we watch the gifts coming in over the week and see whether there's anyone we should flag and research, annually we do this wealth screening with an RFM overlay. And the people who do that actually pull out the, top 500 people who we should start streaming or cycling through our portfolios. So that's how we do it. And it's always gift capacity of $1 million or more and a RFM score of 250. Recency, frequency, and monetary. So how often people are giving to the food bank, how much they're giving, and recency, frequency. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
So here's a kind of a related question. Do you find it useful to categorize donors in a way that helps you define types of strategies for certain types of interests? So I imagine as you meet with donors, and there's a lot of smiling and laughing going on. You like the air quotes. If you meet donors and you find out about them, do you put them in buckets or categories and then relate that to your moves and your plans for them? Thank you again.
I can go on that because we do have several issue areas. I mean, we do defend and advance civil rights and civil liberties across the spectrum, but we do have specific priority issue areas that we focus on. So immigrants' rights, voting rights, LGBT rights, criminal justice reform. I mean, there's a whole slew of them. And so with our organization, I would say, I'm trying to think in my portfolio, I would say that for most of the people who are core donors in my portfolio, I pretty much know what their issue area is, kind of what, gets them all jazzed. And I would obviously direct my ask or my communication. I mean, really, it is the relationship building again. I would direct it towards that specific interest.
Thank you. Lee?
If I know, we try really hard not to restrict gifts or get donors to restrict. But I will play to what their interest is. So if I know they're interested in seniors or children, I will try and engage them in a conversation that is more geared to that interest.
And I should add, thank you for reminding me. Actually, we do also encourage unrestricted gifts, obviously. I mean, yes, I should have added that.
Okay, so we're going to start bringing this discussion to a close. I had a question about how do you make sure you get a copy of the overview moves management piece, and if you are officially registered for this workshop, if you got a reminder email, then we have your email and you'll get it. If you're not, I think you can probably register live stream wise, and then you would definitely get a copy of it, or you can give me your business card and I'll send it to you. And then I wanted to let you know that both of our panelists have agreed to stay a little bit after the discussion. So if you want to follow up or connect with them or with me, please feel free. It's the program after the program. And then I know we have a few people here who are interested in moving into major gifts as a career. We have a few live stream questions. So just what would the two of you recommend for someone who wants to move in that direction?
You go.
Oh, gee, right, okay.
You inspire me.
Oh, what would I say to people who want to go into major gifts? You have to really love people. You have to be pretty much an extrovert, I think. You have to be comfortable talking about things that, I mean, there's some things that you are talking about that really are personal and matter a lot, and it's easier for your passion to show through, but you have to be able to do that for things that might not mean as much to you. You have to be, it's essentially it's sales, I mean, you have to know when to ask, you have to know when to negotiate. The stewardship is really important, like I've said. I mean, to me, it's just the most rewarding thing. I love meeting with my donors. They've not all been great. For the most part, they've been great. It's just, it feeds my soul.
Thank you.
Here's one disagreement I have with you. I don't think you have to be an extrovert. I'm a quirky introvert, and I've still been able to do major gifts. And I think just being very real with people and really feeling the mission has served me well. So I think that people who really care about the work that they're doing and really want to have a good global understanding of what the issue is that we're all trying to solve in all our organizations, that works. Board membership can be a really great way to learn major gifts.
Yeah, that's true.
If you want to get started.
Thank you. So before I ask if you have any final thoughts or encouragements for us, I just wanted to invite all of you, if you're not on my email list, to give me your card. I do these kind of programs 2 or 3 times a year for the Foundation Center and the Development Executives Roundtable, so you won't get that many emails, but you'll get notice. And final thoughts, encouragements, anything else you want to say or share?
It's all about people and about listening to donors. It's much less about talking about what you do.
Yeah, it's really not about you, But I have this one tip that I've been dying to tell everyone, so I'm going to tell it now. And it's really just, kind of a housekeeping thing. But just through my years, I was talking to Corey about this the other day. Through my years of experience, I have learned that if you have a really important piece of communication to send to a donor, a proposal, something that you really want them to read and understand, not just an email with a link to a news article or something like that, do not send it on a Friday afternoon, and do not send it on a Monday morning. Preferably not on Monday at all.
Very practical.
Yeah, I've seen this throughout the course of my career. I've seen people respond so much. There's no follow-up required if you send it during the course of the week, I've found. Not always, but for the most part.
That was the problem with my solicitation yesterday.
There you go. Monday, see, it was a Monday.
Are there any other resources you would recommend?
Well, if you haven't worked with or haven't done a development audit, but I would recommend working with a consultant such as Lisa Hoffman.
Or Brenda Larrabee.
Or Brenda Larrabee back there. I would highly recommend it. You'll identify a lot of gaps and be able to remedy some of those things. How's that for parting words?
Well, thank you so much for your time, and let's wish Katiti a sprained ankle rather than a broken ankle, and whatever it is, a speedy recovery. And thanks again.
Thank you all.
Anything you want to say, Michelle? No? Okay. Have a great rest of the day and go raise those major gifts.
Yeah. I couldn't answer those questions.
Let me ask you something.
Yes.
Is Craig Newmark?
What's that?
Craig Newmark?
Is it?
Is he one good one?
No. Sorry, I didn't know what you were talking about. Asking about it. Hi.
I'm Todd.
Hi, I'm Shanaz. Yes. Nice to meet you.
Are you using some kind of like psychographics or some profiles, certain profiles that you're trying to say, who else matches the profile?
Oh, you mean like almost like algorithms? Could be. You could call them that. No, I don't believe we are actually, but that's a thought.
Great idea.
Yeah. Like an FBI profiler or something? I'm exaggerating.
Sally's 25 to 34.
So characteristics of specific.
So you got the demographic characteristics, but the psychographic. She reads, she volunteers, she takes care of her grandmother. She goes, whatever other aspects you can learn about someone. I guess it could be used to identify folks to just go into the database and maybe receive some communication to see if they run into something.
So is that an idea you have, or is that something you're doing?
No,
I think it's a great idea.
Go for it. Do that. I'm sure I know.
I think there'd be a market.